It was Steve McGregor. He's like, I couldn't think of his name, and I thought you were just messing with me. And I'm like, I had no idea who you meant. Woo! That way you can like sign checks in the dark.
Yeah.
Tinkerbell.
Maybe you did.
Deuces are wild, 222.
It says we're at 4 o'clock. Ready, Matthew? All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. We'll start with an invocation. Lord, please watch over us and allow us to make decisions that help and take care of our good folks of the city of Hannibal. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, is everybody turned on?
Mm-hmm.
On, yay. All right, do I hear a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We don't have anybody signed up today. Does anybody have any comments? Nice to see you, Mike. We'll move right into the general manager report then, Darren.
Thank you very much. I will not till I have the written report that you have before you, and it's available to anybody online as well. But I do have a couple of comments to add to it. One, talking about the legislative happenings that are of great interest to us. The federal ARPA and the infrastructure legislature that's coming out, legislation that is bringing monies to the states, and then that money will eventually, hopefully, filter down to the end user ourselves and to the community. One of the things that we have learned is that currently for that ARPA money, there's approximately $400 million coming to the state. But the state has done a preliminary outreach to the utilities, and there's over $20 billion in projects that are that's on that request now. This is not on the books, nothing official. However, please note that that money that people may think, boy, it's just all of this money going to be raining down on us. That's not the case. There's a lot of more use to go. So just recognize that that difference in those numbers is very, very real. The other thing is to know is that ARPA, one of the things that's going to be coming is that in order for us to take advantage of that, all of the projects, if there is matching funds from the already provided ARPA money, that's going to give you priority. Okay, so please remember that going forward. So anything that we could actually pledge from the existing ARPA money will help us in the future actually take advantage of those funds. Number two, we talk about the supply chain. We are running into some issues already, specifically, as I've written up, the costs of transformers, the cost of a lot of our materials has gone up from 3 to 4, some items even 10 times the cost. Anything that has brass in it, copper, anything that has circuitry in it, all of that is just escalating immensely. And that happens to be much of what we use in our operations and maintenance projects and what we have to do to keep our systems running. So recognize that that is also an impact that's going to be coming towards us.
Darren, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
I just want to check with Matt on GAC. Are we able to get our refills or everything for the treatment plant? Is that everything going okay?
We just have to schedule them further out. It's cut 2-3 months out now because some of the other suppliers aren't able to get material. And so So it's putting more of a load on our supplier, and they're trying to deal with their customers first,
Sure.
but it's pushing our scheduling times out further.
But nothing that's causing you any kind of issue with, okay. I just wanted to check.
In fact, we just finished a change out this last week. During the storm, they were up there doing that last change out. So we're actually right on schedule, doing very well. So Matt and the operations have done just very well there.
Are we using any reactivation or reactivating any of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought we was, but. Thank
Isn't
you.
that the
Sorry.
majority of it, just cleaning it and having it redone
Yeah.
and more of a service than a product?
When we take it out of service, we get 80% of it reactivated and 20% virgin material is what the contracts holds them to.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that. I
No,
just thought
please.
of that
Thank
when I
you
was
for
reading
asking.
your.
The other item on the is meters themselves. And so we have a lot of our project going into AMI, and that's becoming more difficult and much less timely in getting those changed and getting that stock in. So be aware of that. Finally, I would say that we did have our snow event this last week, and we just need to give kudos to everybody on our staff that they all pulled their weight. They were worked hard, they were safe, and we were prepared. And with that, we had no outages due to the storm on the electric side or water sewer. So everything went as planned and as it should, and it goes to, we've got to give all of our employees absolute kudos for a job well done. And that's all I have for the general manager's report.
Matthew, did you have some comment about the meters?
Yeah, on our AMI, we were fortunate enough at the end of 2020 to take advantage of a price discount. So we pre-ordered all of the meters that we were going to need for our entire changeout, with the exception of a couple dozen special forms. So we are fortunate enough to have all of the meters in-house for a majority of our installation. However, on those special meters, I had ordered those in March of 2020, and now the delivery date is November of this year. So we're looking at, 30 to 40, sometimes even 50 weeks for a meter turnaround, because the majority of those are all made out of the country, and the semiconductor shortage is a major factor. But we're hopeful that we won't have any delay as far as deployment goes.
All right. Anything else, anybody? Matt, operations report?
Good afternoon. As you'll see in the electrical portion of the report, we had very few outages of the last month, which was partially due to good weather. The snow, we didn't have any impact, plus we're doing additional tree trimming since the two storms that we had last year. So spending more money there is resulting in fewer outages now. At the water plant, our water production is above what it was in 2021 for the month of January. We're tracking about what we were for 2022 as far as daily production. We did change out vessels 1 and 2 during the month of January. And as Darren alluded to, we changed out vessels 7 and 8 just last week. So we should be setting ourselves up well to change those out on a quarterly basis, just 2 vessels every quarter, and that way we can go ahead and plan for it. It's one of Alex's goals for this next year is try to optimize the usage of it. This is our first 7 and 8 were our first 2 vessels that we changed out. We changed them out, I believe, around the 1st of March last year. So we're getting about 9 months out of each of the 2 vessels.
Is that a little more than we thought we were going to get out of them?
It was about what we thought we were going to get. So it's something we're going to look at quite a bit this year. We're in the 3rd year of our 3-year contract with Calgon, and so we're going to do some more evaluation as far as GAC material as well.
Okay.
During the month of January, we had 26 frozen water, frozen meter calls. 8 of those were on us. The remaining ones were frozen or busted pipes in the homes. So not too bad compared to what we've seen some of the colder years. Wastewater plant, pretty much the same as we did last January. On the sewer collection side of things, the crew installed some new main over at the east end of Gray Street, where that bin wall is, just to the west of Save-A-Lot. There's a ductile iron sewer main that goes off the end of there, and as part of the city redoing that bin wall, as part of their plan, they were looking to relocate that sewer main, so we made some modifications to our system so that that line's no longer in the way. And at the time the city decides to move forward, it'll just be abandoned. It can be taken out of service at that point, or removed at that point. Big thing to look at is the know before the cyber training. Matthew had a graph we put in here for people clicking on the wrong thing or selecting an email or a link that they shouldn't be selecting, and just showing how the training that we're implementing is going through and teaching our employees to be really cautious, especially at this time. I think last week we received security warnings from 2 or 3 different agencies, all tied to the Ukraine, Russia deal on how they're targeting water and wastewater utilities. So something we want to be vigilant about. And you'll see in there, we continue to change water meters out as best we could during the winter months, making appointments with inside water meter customers. And so we're continuing to move forward with that. That's all I've got, unless you all have any questions.
No, I
I don't.
did run into one of your employees out buying a bunch of torches one day.
Yeah, we keep
Tiki room, or what is it?
they keep torches on our trucks to help thaw out water meters and lines and such. So.
Matt, you wouldn't happen to know off the top of your head what you all found at the bottom of Virginia the other day when you got that dug up where the sidewalk was like that? No.
If it was last week,
I just didn't know if you, I seen the crews over there working on it.
I'll find out and let you know.
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought maybe you'd know.
Okay, well, you want to move on to projects report?
Yep. First thing, Trek's continuing to work on our hydraulic model. Over the past few months, we've been collecting data that was incomplete, that we didn't have prior to the hydraulic analysis. And so we've been going out in the field and verifying manholes, verifying line sizes and connection points, and providing that information to them. And so they're taking all that data and putting it in the hydraulic model. They'll combine that with the flow monitoring data that they pulled last fall, and we'll have a model here in the next couple months. North Street, I think as I reported last month, the Corps of Engineers have completed their portion of the project. We're working with Pepping Stone and Bach and Associates to do final design on the portion that we were going to have designed. There were some field modifications that were done during the core project that we're having to incorporate into our design now. And we hope to have 95% plans complete by the end of the month. And hopefully we can take advantage of some of this government money that is coming out to address that issue as well. Finn Substation's been the big electrical project. We went out last month and bought secured materials for the project. A request for proposal was submitted or publicized at the beginning of February for the actual construction of the connection line. We held a pre-bid meeting last Wednesday, I guess it had been, and with the proposals being due on March 9th, and then we'll bring them to you at the March meeting for approval. As part of that project, and Paul will discuss later, we went through a bond rating or a rating with S&P, and then that'll also require some additional meetings to coincide with approvals of City Council. So he'll discuss that. That'll be discussed later as well. That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Hearing none, I think, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, Paul, financial report?
Alrighty. Financial report for the month of January 2022. Not a whole lot going on the balance sheet there. Just an increase in cash that we've been accustomed to seeing due to a profitable month overall. Utility-wide, total assets were up just about 0.2% and about 0.5% from a year ago on the balance sheet, but nothing else significant. Income statement wise, utility-wide net income was about almost $500,000 more than what we had budgeted for the month of January, so another very positive month. The driver with that was, again, the electric fund and the lower than expected purchase power costs. And it is worth noting that what we're paying in our market purchase power costs are actually up. You keep hearing those rumors about natural gas prices being up and electric costs being up, and that is true. However, again, we have those offsets with some of the credits that we get from Prairie State and some of the credits that are built in with our agreement with MISO that are continuing to offset those higher market costs. And so obviously offsetting quite a bit since we're actually seeing lower purchase power costs than what we'd even budgeted. So those hedges that are put in place are really working out to our advantage right now, and we hope that to continue into the future here. Water fund did perform slightly worse than budget. We had that carbon change out again, and so those costs are starting to catch up and even out a little bit. And so the sewer fund did perform better than budget for January. That fund had lower operating expenses overall. Both the water and sewer funds did have higher revenues at about 14% and 7% for each of those funds respectively. And again, revenues thus far have really been right along with budget. So that was a bit of an increase for that month. Next page is our current month compared to January of last year. And utility-wide net income was up about $600,000 from the same month a year ago. The biggest increases there were the electric and sewer funds. Both of those funds had higher revenues and lower operating expenses. And again, the lower purchase power costs, obviously, in the electric fund were a huge part of that. The water fund did perform a little bit worse than a year ago due to those higher expenses. So again, with the water fund, that's just a timing thing. Obviously, the carbon changeouts are our most significant expense in that fund, and so whenever those do hit, it's obviously going to have a pretty big impact, which it'll smooth out over the year since we're not purchasing those every month. Kilowatt hour sales in the electric fund rebounded again. They were up about 3.4% from the same month a year ago, and so that was a positive trend for the electric fund. Next page is our year-to-date actual compared to budget. Utility-wide, we're now about $1.1 million ahead of budget. Again, the electric fund is now about 11% under budget with purchase power costs, and so that's a favorable variance despite operating expenses being about 11% over budget. We are definitely starting to see the impacts of some of the inflation. One thing that sticks out in particular is our fuel costs. Not only are our fuel costs up, but we're also driving around a lot more, changing out meters and doing some things, and so we've seen an increase in those costs, as well as Darren had mentioned with the transformers and things like that. So those are starting to have an impact on our operating expenses, but again, that's being offset by the lower purchase power costs. The water fund now, year to date, has dropped below budget, primarily due to those carbon changeout expenses. Operating expenses are now about 6% over budget in that fund. Revenues are up, though, about 1.4%, so that's slightly offsetting the higher expenses. Last fund is the sewer fund, and again, that fund continues to track right along with budget. So we really did a good job there of the budget for that fund. The last page now is the year-to-date compared to the same month last year. Utility-wide net income is about 9% more than this time period a year ago. Revenues are up about 1.9%. Purchase power costs are down about 8.1%, and operating expenses are up about 12.1%. So all numbers really that we would probably expect, with last year being the COVID year, and we're definitely spending some more from an operating standpoint, getting more work done. Obviously, costs are up, and so no surprise there on that increase. So really, just to recap, the electric fund is having a strong year, primarily due to those credits that we're getting from Prairie State and some of those other hedges that we have in place. And so we'll definitely factor that in when we go to do this next year's budget. However, the trend that we're seeing now in the water fund is something that we'll continue to monitor really closely. We already kind of knew that fund was operating at a pretty tight margin, and we did just start the new debt service payments on the GAC facility this month. And so we're definitely working to keep those costs to a minimum as best we can. Matt mentioned we got the rating from S&P just a couple weeks ago. We did receive an A- rating, which is basically indicates a condition of stable. We, along with Joy Howard, our financial advisor, are very, very happy with that. Just the fact that you do a lease financing automatically docks you a point. And so essentially, had we been doing a revenue bond, we would have received an A rating, which would have matched the highest rating received by any of our utilities up to this point. So basically, anything in the A category kind of guarantees you a pretty favorable interest rate. So very happy with that. So we're tracking right along with our timeline, and we'll get into some special dates that we've got needed. But again, that was kind of the biggest step to get out of the way and get that rating received. And so we do expect to close on our financing after all the special meetings and everything on April 18th. So positive news there. Let's see, I've got the debt service coverage ratios updated on there on page 21 of the financial packet. You'll see again a decrease in the water fund. That the debt service coverage ratio at the end of January was 1.4. Again, our covenants require a ratio of 1.25, and so kind of as expected, we are tracking that very, very closely and working to keep costs as low as possible in that fund. Let's see. We've had a ton of CDs in our investments that are maturing, and we will have quite a few here in the next few months as well. I've kind of gone out and talked to some other financial advisors to get some more advice on markets right now, and interest rates are very much on the rise right now, and so we're kind of doing some short-term investments and waiting for those interest rates to continue to climb even more before we go back out and do some longer-term investments, in anticipating that those interest rates are going to keep rising. That's kind of what I'm hearing and what I've been given advice on. And so basically the last few and the next few that mature, we'll just do 6-month treasuries to kind of bide our time a little bit until interest rates continue to get up to a point where we feel like we can go out and get something longer term. I think that's all I've got for the financial report, unless anybody has any questions.
Nope, that's good. Thank you, Matt. Or Paul, excuse me. And you're still in the barrel, so.
All right. I'll keep shooting then. Let's see. Financial ratios. Key financial ratios are something that we're required by policy to present every year. Typically, we'll receive our audit report in December, and then we'll go ahead and present the financial ratios based on those audited financial statements. So what you've got before you is going off of the June 30th of 21's financial statements. So there's a brief description of each ratio that we look at on there, and kind of benchmark ourselves to some other industries nationwide, and just industries in general, not just utilities. And we'll start with the electric fund. And really entity-wide, we saw pretty much positive changes in all three funds for fiscal year 21. So that was a very good thing. The electric fund, if you recall, we had expected to finish the year at a little bit worse than we did. based on the two storms, well, really the significant ice storm that we had in January of 21, and then the higher purchase power costs that we had during the year. However, kind of unexpectedly, the auditors had an adjustment for us on our pension that recognized a record investment gain for us. And so that kind of flipped that negative net income that we were expecting to a much more positive number. And so those ratios actually improved quite a bit for us. But really the only one that I wanted to point out and touch on was the current ratio, which was basically cut in half for the year. And the reason for that is that we paid off that diesel generator lease in July of 21. So that was the first month of the new fiscal year. And so the auditors had to record an adjustment to classify all that as current. So obviously that current ratio, or that current liability amount, was much higher than it would have been since we paid off that $3.5 million note in the first month of the new fiscal year. Other than that, every single ratio did improve, and really only the net profit margin is below its target of 10%, but it did improve, and we expect will continue to improve with the lower purchase power costs we're seeing this year. With the water fund, not much fluctuation in those ratios. Again, the one that we've been monitoring very closely is debt service coverage, which you can see from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21 did improve quite a bit. However, that's a little bit misleading. In fiscal year 20, we had a liability with Rawls County Public Water Supply that was paid off. And then our new debt service payments on the GAC facility didn't start until fiscal year 22. And so fiscal year 21 was actually a little bit of a lower debt service coverage year. So that's why that ratio improved. The sewer fund actually saw positive changes in pretty much every ratio across the board, except for times interest earned, which was pretty consistent, as well as debt service coverage ratio. So with the sewer fund, it is pretty highly leveraged, which means that there is quite a bit of debt with that fund compared to the revenue that it sees. And so obviously we work to keep costs to a minimum in that fund, but it is going to have some ratios that are a little bit poor in terms of the debt service calculations. We did see an increase in net income in that fund, though, 6.4%. And so we are doing a good job of keeping expenses lower with the revenues that are coming in. So company-wide, there are only two ratios that we see that are below their targets, and that would be debt to assets and net profit margin. Both of those ratios, however, did improve. So really can't ask for much more there. Obviously, you all know that we do have quite a bit of debt out there with the two revenue bonds in the water fund and then the revenue bond in the sewer fund. And then obviously we'll have this new lease financing in the electric fund. So we do have a lot of debt, obviously, that factors into budgeting and paying those debt service payments. But that is why you see kind of a debt to assets ratio that isn't quite at its target. And then our net profit margin is just a tick below its target. And so we do anticipate being right at that target of 10% next year if all goes well. Make sure I covered everything I wanted to here. Yeah, really from a pure operating standpoint, from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21, revenues were down about 1.2%, but expenses were down even more at 2.5%. So that is why we saw an increase in a lot of those ratios. Any questions on any of these ratios before we move on?
Anybody? Thank you very much, Paul.
All righty, thank you.
All right, next under new business is special meeting date approval.
Okay, so we sit at February 22nd today, and we expect to close on our financing April 18th. And so between now and that time, we do need to schedule two special meetings with the board, with you guys, to kind of coincide with the city council in getting all the necessary documents approved. So the first one we'd be scheduling would actually be March 15th. And so that's a Tuesday. That would be the second. It'd actually be the third Tuesday in March, which would coincide with the city council's council meeting that night. So really, what we'd be doing there is just adopting the resolution that would that we'd be going out to approve the lease financing, and then immediately following our special meeting, the city council would actually be approving the ordinance. So two different documents, but they still kind of coincide. The reason we want to do it on March 15th is because Joy Howard, our financial advisor, expects to be at that city council meeting, so she'd like to be here, and she can talk much more about that at a high level during that meeting. So right now we need to get that on the schedule for March 15th, and then the other special meeting is going to be April 5th, which will be the first Tuesday in April. So whatever time works best for you guys. Again, with Joy being in town, we'd probably want to keep it around 5:30 to be able to do a half-hour meeting or so, and then give us enough time to get over to the city council meeting after that. So at 5:30, I think is what we talked about. If 5:30 works for you guys on those two evenings, then we might plan for that. If you want to do earlier, though, that's likely not a problem.
Is 5:30 good, or would y'all rather do it like I don't know what you do during the evening, Melissa? But
I'm usually pretty good. Unless something catastrophic happens, I can get out.
Yeah, I'm not available that week.
Oh, you're out.
Yeah.
John, are you? No, I'm fine. So we'd at least have three of us.
Okay.
Time-wise, it doesn't really matter to me, but
Let's call it 5:30. All right, we'll do it 5:30.
March 15th.
Yes.
March 15th, and then the other one would be April 5th. And the April 5th meeting will be actually approving the sale and all the necessary documents. And then the city council will be doing the exact same thing at their meeting. So do we want to do 5:30 for that one as well?
everybody good with that?
I'm good, yeah.
Yep, sounds
All
right.
righty.
And will you be available that week, Bill? Okay.
Okay, we don't need to do any voting or anything with that, do we?
Do we need to do?
I don't believe so.
Not for a special.
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Emily, you're up.
Good evening. So I just wanted to go over a little bit with you all about our disconnection policy. As it says over my head, we are here for the purpose to provide safe, reliable utility service. That is what we like to do. That is what our purpose is in our business. Unfortunately, on one of the items that we have to do to keep that rolling is have disconnections as well for non-payment. Most utilities have disconnection for non-payment policies in place because you're protecting those consistent paying customers from taking on that financial burden from accounts that are unpaid. So kind of as I go through this, I'm going to kind of walk through our policy and then some of our stats that go along with that. As I talk, if I say the word disconnection, I'm referring to a disconnection for non-payment. I might say the word cutoff as well, all referring to the same thing. Sometimes I just don't say the whole phrase together. So as most of you probably know, all of our disconnections, it all starts with our billing cycle. Our bills come out, and once those mail out, it starts the sequence of events. Your bills are due 17 days after they are mailed out. On the 18th day in the afternoon normally, we are going to apply a penalty to unpaid accounts. Send out reminder notices to everyone so that they have that more opportunity to move forward with payment. Before we send any of those out, We are looking at drop boxes. We are looking we're going to finish all of our mail that came in that day because we want everyone to have every opportunity to pay that they can. Those penalties are 10% up to $20 is how those are calculated on everyone's bill. Then 13 days after that due date is when people become eligible for disconnection. And at that point, our CSR team really goes into high gear. They're going to run a report to identify what accounts are still unpaid, and they're going to start looking at those for payment assistance pledges, for payment arrangements that may be there. They're going to look at credit histories on account. If it's commercial, residential, if it's a remote meter, they're looking at a lot of documentation in there to really make sure that they're not missing anything. And that's when we start making a lot of extra contact with people as well, especially when there's weather like we've had. This time of year with the weather, we do have a weather policy that goes into place. Actually, it refers to our weather policy, refers to both cold and the heat. But during the winter months, so ours goes from October 1st to March 31st. If the temperature is predicted to be below 32 degrees, we're going to hold off on any disconnections for non-payment. We're going to give a customer a yellow door tag that gives them 5 additional days to pay so that they have that opportunity to come in and to make that payment. During the summertime, it is from June 1st to August 31st, and it is when it is predicted to be above 90 degrees. We use weather.gov so that we're consistent with what information we're looking at and where we're pulling that from. Then to reconnect, anyone who pays to reconnect and their reconnection fee before 4 o'clock, our service people go out and can reconnect them the same day. And then what's most important to me is really looking at those numbers because, like I said, it's not something that any of us enjoy on our team, but it's just part of the business that we have to operate through. When I pulled up 2 weeks ago, we had just over 9,500 accounts. So that's going to be a combination of accounts that are electric, water, and sewer, some that are just electric, some just water, sewer, some sewer. Of those, on average, about 1,600 people receive delinquent notices every month, so about 17%. Of those 1,600 people who receive that delinquent notice, about 400 of them become eligible for disconnection. So that's sort of first stage of our cutoff process that we're looking at. That 400 people, though, each month, if you look at some of the reports, I know Paul provides you with the cutoff numbers every month. So last month in January, we had 51 cutoffs. There were 377 people who were eligible, and only 51 of them got to a cutoff. So that's only 0.5% of our customers. So we're looking at a really small percentage of customers who are disconnected for non-payment. Which I'm really thankful for. And I really attribute, especially this last month, to our customer service team because they've worked diligently. Like I said, looking at those payment assistance, not just looking to see if it's on the account, but really being that liaison for our customers to help them and connect them with payment assistance or payment arrangements that they may qualify for. So I'm really proud of our customer service team for the work that they put into that, because I think it really shows in that decrease of numbers so that, the least amount of people are being in that situation as possible. On average, though, looking at a year, about 120 people a month are disconnected for non-payment. Looking at the account level, that's 1% roughly. So, that's 99% of our customers that are not disconnected for non-payment. It's 99% of our customers that we are protecting from taking that financial burden on. And that's really a great place to be. I feel like at that high of a percentage on average to have utility service. And that's about all that I have, unless you all have any questions.
I actually do.
Mm-hmm.
We know that hopefully we're coming out the backside of COVID and
Right.
everything that came along with that. I just wasn't, I tried to kind of keep up, and I've received a little bit of correspondence and things. What was our policy during COVID, according to bill payment and disconnect? And then how are we coming out the other side of that policy,
Right.
if we are, when we are?
Yeah, so we had a period of time during COVID, especially in those first parts of 2020. Also coinciding with when we had to shut down the office to walk-in traffic especially. We had, I believe it was from mid-April to mid-June, where we didn't apply any penalties to accounts. We did continue to send out notices because for a lot of assistance programs, people need that notice to be able to qualify for it. So we didn't want to take that opportunity away from them, but at the same time, we didn't want to penalize them. And then it was August of 2020 where we started our disconnections again and sort of following this policy. At that time, we also reached out, you may remember, and we requested some of the CARES Act funding. We worked with Douglas for them to facilitate that. They already facilitate our Project Share and Care money every month that goes to our utility customers, so they were a great fit for that. And that was a great way for us to help people, especially if they had not been able to pay for multiple months and been sort of moving, funding in other places to help them get caught back up. And that's been a great part too of, in this past year, there's been a lot of increases in assistance agencies. NECAC's funding has increased this year for people, and some of their parameters have also increased. So that's one way that the customer service team is, talking to people, because they may say, oh, well, I've never qualified. I was always right on the line, especially. And we can encourage those people to go out and try again, because we all know it's a lot easier to get behind on things than to get caught back up. And we want to help our customers get in a good place and get in a good routine with things.
Great.
So I have one. How do you deal with the crazy weather like you have now with the cutoffs? Do you, when you got a 60-degree day in the morning and then 25 at night?
Right. So how our policy reads is that if it is predicted to be below 32 degrees in the next 24 hours, we would send out a door tag. And then at the point that those 5 days are up, it reads that we could disconnect, it would be regardless of the weather at that point. However, obviously, recently we've had with snowstorms with, 12 feet of snow and ice, we look at that because we're humans. And, it's not something that we want to do to, have someone's utilities turn off with either a predicted storm or when one has happened. So there have been times in this past month that I've had them hold off either on sending door tags, on following up from door tags, because of what the weather's going to be. Just because ethically I feel better about that as a human, honestly. And I feel that even though we are trying to do our best for the whole community, there are times where you have to make those exceptions.
Very good answer. Thank you.
Emily, is there any statistical number of hours, days, or minutes between when somebody gets cut off and when they actually come up with the money they need to? Or maybe just your experience?
Hour-wise, not really. I can tell you, I do have, well, it's just kind of numbers. I know how many accounts, for instance, are reconnected versus how many are closed out. So any accounts that are reconnected, they've paid. Any accounts that we close out, it's been 5 to 10 days after their cutoff time, and we close out their accounts. That can be for different reasons. Sometimes it's they didn't come up with the money. It could be. It could also be that they moved out. And, when we get to that point of disconnection is when we find out, maybe from a landlord or something.
Goes back in
that
the landlord's name?
At times, yeah. So, let me see what my number is here. So of about 1,600 total cutoffs in the past 13 months, 1,370 of them were reconnected and 223 were closed out.
Do you have a feel for the demographic of the ones that get cut off? Like, are they 90% of them brand new to the BPW?
No, a lot of our disconnect list, people who are on the disconnect list, are continual. They're people that, a lot of them we know and we work with monthly.
Yeah.
Some of it is a timing issue that time just gets away from them, and maybe they meant to go seek assistance and they didn't get out there. Sometimes it's just, kind of a balancing act of what they need to do to make their payments.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Emily.
Good job. Appreciate the info.
All right, it comes that time again. James, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments.
All right, general discussion. Does anybody have any general discussion?
Do you have a question? I see that Mike is here. I understand that you went to Washington for legislative days or something like that.
I have in the past.
Oh, you haven't recently?
That's this weekend.
This
Oh,
weekend.
it's coming
we
out.
did-
Okay, I was just curious what you learn, and we'll do it next time.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, do I have a motion?
To go into closed session pursuant to section 610.02112 of the Missouri Sunshine Law, the meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss contracts to include Darren, Matthew, Paul, James, Courtney, and the
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Yep.